Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh, everyone. Welcome to today's show. This is Canada Today, Youth Edition. I'm your host, Mohammed Maxwell Hassan. Yes, my middle name is Maxwell. If this is the first time you're here, I want to welcome you to Muslim Network TV, and in particular, these segments, every Wednesday at 7 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, is all about addressing youth issues within the Muslim community. And so today's topic is going to be a very sensitive topic, but we want to make sure that we tread carefully, we tread lightly, and we go about this with an open mind and open heart. In particular, with today, we're going to be discussing a lot of things regarding mental health. In particular, there's some issues you might see circulating around: depression, anxiety, PTSD, and more. And within the Muslim community, you might find that there's a lot of shackles, there's a lot of barriers, it's a lot of roadblocks, even in 2020, that are still unable to be broken. And so with us here today, we got two amazing guests here to kind of shed light on new perspectives on this whole issue. And so with us here today is Muhammad Shikh as one of our guests. 2013, Muhammad has been helping individuals and organizations break through emotional and mental blocks by teaching them how to use their unconscious mind and how to activate their heart to produce more resourceful and desired states and behaviors. While many talk about the importance of having access to resourceful internal states such as confidence, assertiveness, gratitude, love, etc., few are able to actually teach how to access such states. So Muhammad's approach is all about teaching you the methodology, the step-by-step recipe, if you will, to achieving the desired states and results. And mashallah, that is so much needed. And thank you so much, Mohammed, for stopping by in today's conversation. In addition, we also have, we got also Sister Saba Jawad. She is a child and youth counselor. She was usually sick as a baby and a child, and she grew up around family and friends who had differing abilities, medical conditions, mental health concerns, and the ability to negatively judge others on demand. And this pushed her to help others in need. And so textbooks in terms of textbook in terms of motivation and help, right? So the idea is that she did her honors Bachelor of Science in Disability Studies and Psychology, and she did a Master of Arts in Child Studies, a clinical diploma in child and youth care. She's been in this industry, she's been in this arena, I should say, and she's been all about helping others and getting into the trenches to really uncover a lot of these things. So Sister Saba, thank you so much as well. Your insight is going to be super appreciated. So let's start off actually with Sister Saba. Again, ladies first here. With everyone who gets on the show, I always want to make sure, the viewers get a chance to get their inside story, get a taste, if you will, as to why you decided to choose this profession. I mean, there's a million choices. You could have gone through a million different fields. But Sister Saba, if you can kindly, in brief and summary, why did you decide to go about life this way and tackle mental health in this regard?
Hey, assalamu alaikum. I just hope you're all doing well. I wanted to get into mental health to basically provide help that I myself or other people that I know of have been seeking, but there's either a lack of resources or quality of care. So I essentially wanted to be the person that fills that gap. And then I got into the field and realized I am just one person, but I guess if everyone did their part, then it's not just one person. That's in a nutshell why, really.
That's amazing. Yeah, fair. I mean, you got someone has to do it, right, in that way. So we'll dive a bit more into your journey and conversation about that, because I'm sure everybody has their own different unique circumstances in going at it. So wonderful. So Brother Muhammad, I know you're all about NLP, and for those viewers who have no idea what NLP is about, could you kindly walk us through that and kind of your journey as to how you got into this sphere in society?
Yeah, no, absolutely. So, in a nutshell, my story is I actually grew up going to school, to be a programmer, right? Like that was the goal. But in my, university career, I started getting hit with so much anxiety because, really whatever was going on, that I literally could not walk into an exam or a test. It just got so bad, which is really abnormal for me, just considering my background. I mean, I used to be the kid that would get a 90 without even trying. And, my high school OAC average, like I was that kid, that just brought home great marks, and academics was, my strong suite. So when that happens, long story short, I went from being this, A+ student to actually dropping out of school completely, which really crushed all of my self-esteem, which crushed a lot of my self-worth. I was able to put on a good show, but inside I was really, really hurting. So I found NLP in that state, and it completely changed my life. Now, I never went, to be honest. I never thought that I would actually be working with people, which I do today. I work with people with depression. I work with people with anxiety. I work with people with PTSD, trauma, people that have had a lot of horrible things, going on either in their life currently or had gone on in their life at some point, and it's still affecting them today. I never really thought. I got into this really to kind of help me and just discover. And for me, it was really a journey of professional development, not necessarily mental health. The way I got into the whole mental health side is one, because as you know, I'm not a medical professional. So, technically I'm not supposed to be speaking about things like this, but I got a volunteer gig at an organization, which I'm sure we've all heard of now, who've been doing phenomenal work, Nasiha. And, it was really interesting when Nasiha first started out, they were really a youth line. And we would take calls from various youth. And, the job as a counselor was basically to just kind of be an ear, to provide a confidential space, to provide, no judgment. That's exactly where I met Saba as well. And Saba and I have been great friends. Like, we're going back about 6, 7 years now. And well, the interesting thing is, while we're just supposed to be listening, what I ended up doing, because, hey, I can't help it, I just know this stuff works, I would start leading them through these exercises that involve their mind, that involve, role play, that involve their physical body, right? And people just started getting better. So that's why I'm like, this is really interesting. Like, yeah, I can just sit back and listen, but there's no change. And that's the big thing about my work is I want to see change, and I want to see change fast. And I want to see change as, that's going to be fast and something that's actually going to last, right? So that's kind of how I got into mental health. It was completely by fluke. It's accident. I own an IT company, which is being wasted because I spend all my time doing this work. But alhamdulillah, right? This work needs to be done.
That's awesome, Marshall. So there you go. I think so many people can resonate with the whole crashing and burning, especially with school. It's definitely one area that a lot of people, it's a very vulnerable area and stage in one's life. And so it's good to see you pull yourself out of it. But I think just to make sure everyone's on the same page, for someone who's never heard of NLP, like, what does it even stand for? What's that all about? So yeah.
And to be honest, I know most people know me as this big NLP guy because of the courses that I teach and everything. And I have a different course for therapists for them to take as well. But NLP stands for Neuro Linguistic Programming. It's a model. That's all it is. It's just a model that really came around in the 70s. And it was created by actually a student of psychology who was really curious and interested. How come is it that all of the books of psychology, everything our professors are talking about, all the research, all has to do with why people have problems? How come we're not going out and actually studying the people who used to have depression, that used to have anxiety, that used to have PTSD, and that suddenly one day woke up and we're like, no, this is not me anymore, right? So like, why aren't we going and studying that? I think they might have something to teach us. So really what NLP is it is a study of human experience, is a study of, human excellence, really. And what they created was a set of tools to model excellence, meaning if one person can do something really well, we can actually go and break it down into step-by-step pieces and learn how to do it ourselves. And it's really now, it's gone into so many different things. I mean, I look at it more from a therapeutic aspect, right? But you can use it for business, you can use it for sales, you can use it, it really has a wide scope. The guy who has really taken NLP and made it famous is Tony Robbins. Right. Oh, yeah. And if you're familiar with Tony Robbins, right? So, we're supposed to be talking about mental health here, but just to kind of give you a thing, NLP borrows from a lot of the work of Fritz Perls, who is the father of Gestalt therapy. It borrows from Virginia Satir, who was a family therapist. It borrows from Milton Erickson, who was a clinical psychiatrist, but he used hypnosis interventions more than actual medicine, right? Which is, another thing that I'm certified in and I do a lot of.
Okay, that's great, Mark.
High level. Hope that answers.
Marshall, that's a good point. I guess, for those, NLP. That's for those who want to dive into it and learn more about it. So let's move on to another, pertinent topic within this is that, so now we got a sense of where you two come from, your backgrounds. Sister Saba, if I can ask you, based on your experience overall within the Muslim community, what are your general observations in terms of how Muslims treat mental health or have these kind of conversations and discussions? Is it something that's open or is it still closed? Or, I guess I'll just throw it out there. What do you, generally speaking, when it comes to mental health, how do Muslims view it and tackle it?
I think it depends a lot on who it is. So I want to say there is a generational gap, but honestly, it could be so many other things, like it could be educational as well. So there are some areas in the world, some people in the world, it's not about what country you're in, honestly. I thought it was, if something is an idea, or maybe it's more, it may be but it turns out it's just all over the world. You'll run into people that are either really, really okay talking about mental health, and it's almost like what you had for breakfast today, like what did you have? Or they're either very opposed to it, just like mental health, what's that? They know what it is, but let's not go there. So there's no happy medium in which it's almost like a harm reduction approach where, you're trying to tackle an issue and then you're trying to just bring it down a notch or a few notches based on who it is that needs help. For us, it's always either, hey, there's no mental health, or hey, let's fix this person because that's what we're good at doing. We like fixing and we're actually able to fix. And then it's like, well, is it broken? Is it bent? Does it matter? It's more about meeting people where they're at. And I think that piece is missing. And I'm not sure so much if it's just in a specific community. I think it's kind of across the board, but I do notice it a bit more. There are certain cultures or religion focus that have certain stigmatizations. But that's pretty much what I've noticed, I think, and what I've seen in different areas of health. Like I worked at a hospital, I worked at a residential treatment center, I worked at a school board, custody cases, behavior intervention, phone counseling. Probably missed something, but if it comes up, I'll mention it. But and different ages and range of behavior and need and disability and differing ability. So it's not just only babies or only teenagers. It's working with parents as well, because it's holistic. Everyone is part of the situation, and it's not the individual, it's the situation. That's another thing I've noticed in our community or in general in society is the problem is the person and not the situation they're in. And that's, I think, a lot of the stigma as well. It's let's fix you because you are the issue. It's not that you have depression, it's you are depressed. There's a big difference in the language,
I see.
And it's not like, you have anxiety. Like, you get what I'm trying to say?
Yeah,
it's like you are the issue.
Yeah, sorry to interrupt you. Like I was gonna say, like Marshall, so it sounds like it's like you're merging the two. It's like you become this diagnosis, right? So like I am anxious.
Exactly.
So there's that identity.
Yeah.
I see. Merge.
Yeah.
Very good point. So brother Muhammad, in your opinion, when it comes to things like this, when it comes to conversations about mental health surrounding the Muslim community, what are some things that you've noticed through your time spending with the general Muslim population?
Yeah, so I mean, I get a lot of clients. I think about at least half of my clients are are Muslims, right? And it's really interesting because, as Sabah said, it does vary. I mean, age has a lot to do with it, but I think everything that Sabah said is absolutely beautiful and it's absolutely, encapsulates everything. So I'll kind of, just kind of add on to that. One of the things that I really noticed is that the thing that really does seem to be missing from our understanding of mental health is, we start having these emotions and we might go and seek out help, but we go to our imams and we go to like the masjids and stuff, and their response is just, oh, you just need to pray more, right?
Oh, yeah.
And that just, like that in and of itself can be a whole conversation because of the amount of damage it starts doing, because then the person's like, oh, wait a second. So because I'm feeling this way, is it because I'm not a good Muslim? Because I'm not praying enough, because this and all of that sort of stuff. And, a lot of people actually started talking about this under the term of spiritual bypassing. But, so there's that thing. And then the other thing that really isn't, and Sabah beautifully touched upon it, is there actually is a lot of misinformation kind of put out there. I mean, it's not misinformation. I think the people putting it out there, they have a good intention, but the people on the receiving end will go and learn about anxiety, will go and learn about depression, and suddenly self-diagnose themselves and be like, oh, I have anxiety, I have depression, or I am depressed, I am anxiety, which is an identity statement, exactly what Sabah says, which really becomes like a life sentence, as opposed to realizing that Allah, He gave us the ability to have these range of emotions for a reason. Anxiety, for example, is to really allow us to pay attention. That's what it's there for, right? And if you're feeling depressed, this, chances are there's probably something going on in our life. But what we do is we make the diagnosis or the problem, we start treating really the symptoms. So going, just to go back to, I went off on a little bit of a tangent there. What I find in the Muslim community is that generally, the go-to response is we need to pray more, which actually isn't an answer and could actually hurt our relationship potentially with our Creator. And go back to our parents. I mean, I'm 38 now, so my parents are in their 60s. I mean, this wasn't an option. I think we have a luxury right now that we can actually get into sort of the expressions and stuff. For our parents, we have to understand that most of them kind of came out of a war, right? Or they were children of parents who came out of a war. So for them, it was really about survival. So we didn't have time to go and figure out what was happening to us, right? I mean, we had to really have a lot of patience. We had to have a lot of resilience because we needed to survive. Now, the reason I bring that up is that doesn't mean that there was no imprints left, right? And so now we have these people as parents, and now we're having our own imprints because they didn't really necessarily know how to deal with that. The education wasn't there, the tools and the resources weren't there, and now we're going through our own stuff. Potentially, even there's science knows there's also things called generational trauma, so we might have a bit of that as well. And we go to our parents, and it's like, I'm sort of feeling this way. And our parents will be like, oh, you just need to pray more because that's what we did. You just need to be tougher. And this is where the conversation starts falling apart because we do need to get things addressed, but we also need to understand that just because we're feeling a certain way doesn't mean that that's a life sentence. And it doesn't mean who we are. We are so much more than just our thoughts, our emotions, our mind. We are really a sum. There's so much that makes us the human experience. So these are the sort of things that really are never talked about. The majority of our education comes from like the Friday khutbah. When was the last time you attended a khutbah? I mean, I've started hearing them now, but when was the last time we went to a khutbah and they were talking about, the importance of mental fitness, the importance of mental health, right? And listening to our body, listening to our emotions. So there really is a big gap. I see it as an opportunity. I think there's an opportunity, and there's a lot of people like Sabah who are having these conversations. Alhamdulillah.
That's great. This is a nice segue into what let's just say it. Let's put on our imaginary hats and let's put on something else that could be exciting. So let's say, Sister Saba, let's say you had control of the narrative or how mental health is to be discussed or handled, right? So, nowadays you have examples of the Bell Let's Talk. You have situations where, you have tons of different initiatives that are out there. Everyone has their own approach. They have their own way of steering this conversation. Let's say you had full control. You were given the opportunity to say, okay, whatever you say goes. This is how mental health needs to be discussed and handled and talked about for the greater society. How would you go about doing that? What would you say is the current situation that you feel needs fixing? And if you are in control, how would you guide those kind of conversations?
Oh, wow. I feel like a superhero now.
Yeah.
Okay. If I do have control. So basically, really, I think in my master's, I did a program evaluation basically as my research project. And it was not so much of a program evaluation to judge the service that was provided, but to see how people that are at the receiving end of the service, how they feel the service is. Because us as a service provider, we think we're doing our best. But if that is not met with something more mutual in terms of a feeling by the people receiving the service, I'm not saying it doesn't matter that we're working hard, but it definitely matters to see what the other person receiving the service has to say. So if I had full control, I would roll out a lot of surveys across the board for every single agency in healthcare, mental health, medical, physio, anything related to mental health. It could be physical aspects, it could be medical aspects, familial, anything at all that will affect our mental health, even if it's education, because we undermine a lot of our, areas of health that are impacted. So basically, I would roll out surveys, program evaluations, because they're not so often done, because there is a hesitancy in doing them, because sometimes we find out the reality of the quality of a program, and that affects the type of funding it may or may not receive, or lose certain funding that's already available. So I would do that if I had full control, because I think I know a lot about the field because I've been in it, but I can't do much in terms of a positive or a productive change until I ask the people that are receiving the service, what do you think? How do you feel? How does this make you feel? What can I do differently? It's really customer service at that point. I know it sounds odd to mix the two, but that's what it is. If I need to see if I'm being efficient or I have any efficacy in my practice, it's not just about being reflective and having reflective practice. It's also about being evaluated. So essentially, I would evaluate everyone and everything.
MashaAllah, everyone and everything. Look at that. That's like anything under the sun that can be evaluated, and you go ahead and do it. But MashaAllah, I really like that you're lending a listening ear. You want to hear out what people have to say. Sometimes you can go through life and you think you're awesome or you're doing amazing things, but if there's no feedback, positive reinforcing feedback, or constructive criticism, it's not just positive. You don't want to be in this echo chamber. Then the efforts are in vain. So great, Marco. So rolling out surveys to really test and see where we are. Wonderful. So I asked you the same question, Brother Muhammad. If you had full control, I know you mentioned in the beginning that NLP is a model, and there's so many. All roads lead to Rome, right? So is NLP one way to get to that promised land of everyone, breaking through and having strong, healthy mental health? Or, if you had full control, if, funding was your way, everything was your way, the conversation guided was the way you would go about doing it, even though there's a million different options, how would you go about this whole ordeal?
Yeah, absolutely. First of all, I think that's a great conversation and it's a great question. NLP isn't the answer to everything, right? I mean, like I said, it's just a model, right? And whether it's NLP or it's hypnosis or it's EMDR for trauma, which really is an offshoot of NLP, or it's brain spotting, or it's CBT, or it's talk therapy, or whatever. Like these are all effectively, as you said, these are all roads that, they're useful in certain cases, and in other cases it just makes sense to do something else, right? I think really if I could install maybe 3 foundational concepts, that would be sort of the difference that makes all of the difference. And one of those things which I'm not even going to talk about is just, hey, maybe actually let's look at the model, because we really truly do have a sick care system, right? I mean, the industry is really built when people are sick, and that from an economic standpoint is, it just leads to so much other issues. But I'm not going to talk about that. Rather, the 3 concepts that really I would love for children to learn just from the day, from like right from the get-go, is 1, I am more than my beliefs, I am more than my emotions, I'm more than my behaviors. These are all things that I know how to do, right? But that's not necessarily who I am. The second thing is there's nothing wrong with us, right? I mean, one of the mentors that I have, he says, we're all functioning absolutely perfectly. There's nothing wrong with us, but perhaps we have a belief that gets in the way. Perhaps we have a strategy or a behavior that gets in the way. And all that means is it needs updating, right? And so that whole thing that we're absolutely exactly how Allah has created us, that and just knowing that really gives us a good and solid foundation to kind of build, that mental health, mental wellness from, right? So we're more than just our emotions, we're more than our beliefs, and there's absolutely, we're fine, we're completely fine. And also to understand that who says we have to be happy all the time, right? Who says we have to be perfect, right? We live in a time, because of all the commercialism, because all the ads, everyone's trying to sell us a course or a product or this or that. I mean, understand that really it is to drive economy, right? It's to make a buck, right? But what that's done to us, we think that we always have to be upgrading ourselves. We always have to be perfect. We all have to be like this. We have to be like that. And the reality is we're not, I like to say, and I borrow this from someone, this is not my saying, but we're human beings. We're not human doings. And so to understand that, it's okay for me to have a day where I just cry and I don't want to do anything, right? And I have those days. And it's okay for me to get angry, because there's lots of things in the world to get angry about, right? It's when, of course, these things become, a habit, repetitive, where we need to realize that we need to address this and really go for the root cause, rather than just the symptom. But this is kind of, the whole thing is to just understand that whoever told us, whoever taught us that we're supposed to be perfect, that we're supposed to be on all the time, this is the dunya. We're not in Jannah yet. Inshallah, we all make it to Jannah, but this is the dunya. It's going to have challenges. We're going to get knocked out. And the best we can do is just maybe learn different ways to get back on our feet, maybe quicker. And having hopefully, inshallah, learned, right? And that's what we grow. I mean, this is life, is the knocking down and getting back up. So if we install these foundational, concepts, I really think we will end up with a lot more resilience, a lot more ability to have self-regulation, and just have kindness and softness. People are so impatient. My wife was saying that too. It's like, I make a right turn and I'm like, oh my God, I'm supposed to take a right here. I indicate and everything, but the guy behind me is like honking. Right now, I don't get affected or anything like that, but it gives me a chance to kind of ponder. It's like we've become a species that has just become so impatient, right? So it's to kind of slow down and give ourselves permission to actually be a human being, be what Allah has created us.
MashaAllah, man, that's amazing. And about that car scenario, I can't imagine. I can't tell you how many times I stop at a red light, and then the moment it turns green, even if, God forbid, you stayed there for an extra second, there's a nice big honk waiting for you. It's almost like we're in a rush to nowhere, and it's sad.
I love that. Yes, we are. We're in a rush to nowhere.
You know what I mean? Like we have that get, hurry, all that quickly, fast, Paula. So I like that. We're human beings, not human doings. We got to be and Spawn, what does Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, it reminds me of? Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, kun fayakun, right? Be and it is. And so it's not work until hustle, like this hustle. This is a conversation for another day, but like, the whole hustle culture, that whole, you gotta shop till you drop and all that jazz, like it's Paula, that's another thing. But I like that. You're instilling those core foundational things.
We need to know, we need to give ourselves time to rest and recover. And that's absolutely what being human is about, right? Go get help, right? That's the thing. I think we should be okay to get help. I mean, I do this for a living, and I have a short list of coaches and therapists that I will give a call to when I can't get myself out of a rut, right? And that has nothing to do with my identity. It's just that, look, I need to, there's people counting on me. And I want to be back on my feet as quickly as possible, and I will do whatever it takes, right?
Yeah, exactly. So wonderful. So now let's take this another direction. So Sister Saba, nowadays, especially when it comes to mental health and with the Muslim community in particular, one of the things that may be observed commonly is that there seems to be a lot of roadblocks in conversations. Earlier, as you mentioned, it's almost like 0 or 100. Either you treat people, let's say you're talking about depression as a person, like not the situation, the person itself. And so I'm curious, is there a conflict between Islamic teachings? You don't have to answer from a scholarly perspective or anything of that nature, but generally speaking, now it's 2020, we have a lot of resources at our disposal. The field of psychology has evolved. If there's some hesitation talking about things like NLP or talking about things of other, I'm sure in your field as well, there's certain terminologies that you use or some activities that could be done. And maybe a lot of Muslims who aren't familiar with that, they're like, they like, I think Brother Muhammad was mentioning about just go with the default answer is go pray more. And so in your opinion, Sister Saba, is there how do I say, friction between Islamic teachings and modern day psychology, or what? How do we untangle this, or what's the current assessment in your opinion?
That's a very loaded question, and I have a hopefully simple answer. Well, no. The thing is, at least from my understanding of Islam, and I'm not speaking on a scholarly basis, I'm not qualified to, the Prophet, peace be upon him, since I was a kid, the only story I really remember in a time where, you're sitting in traffic and someone's honking at you and you just want to lose your mind, or, someone comes up to you and says, I want to take my life, but it's not agreeable to do that because, I'm also Muslim and Islam says, suicide is not okay. The only story for some reason my mind goes to was when the angel came to the Prophet and said, these people have hurt you, I'm going to collide the mountains and everyone will be gone. And the Prophet said, don't do that, because you don't know whom out of these people may or may not, become the followers of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala later, and the assumption was that they didn't already follow Islam. So that kind of defined the word empathy for me since I was a kid. That one story, just that one story. And so I think for us, as humans, not even as Muslims or just in general, like my mom always even says, be a good human, because if you can't be a good human, then how are you going to be a good Muslim? And then if you're not a good Muslim, how are you going to be a good mu'min? So really, it's not about Islam and psychology. It's more about culture. As soon as the culture piece gets introduced, where we're judging, oh, you drink, oh, you smoke, but it's culture, okay, more or less. But oh, you want to take your life, that's very wrong. Well, actually, no, drinking is also very wrong if you look at it in terms of perspective. It's more culturally what has become accepted has changed over time, and some things don't change over time. sometimes it's easier and okay for some people to be like, well, okay, but some people drink and some people don't. That's okay. But oh no, we cannot talk about LGBTQ and suicide because that has never been okay and it's never going to be okay. But it's like, well, religiously, I mean, they're both considered to be not okay. So if you want to really judge, shouldn't we be judging the whole world then? But then where does that leave us as people? Like, we're going to fall apart really fast and really hard, and we can't get back together. So the only other way to look at it is then harm reduction is, well, okay, there is this issue. How can we de-escalate it so that we bring some sort of comfort to this person? Like, if you really want to look at the psychological and the Islamic perspective together and whether it makes sense or not, I see it as a very, very good fit, because it's essentially saying someone is in pain, you show them empathy, because even in the Quran, like, there's more mention of empathy and forgiveness than there is of punishment, which is pretty basic concept. We don't have to go too deep into an analysis, right? So if that's the teaching of Islam, then treatment and psychology in Islam, it's almost like hand in hand for me. Like, in my mind, that's how connected it is. That's the concept of empathy. The only issue comes in when culture comes in, and that's another topic for another day, I think.
Yeah, that's so. There you go. So circling back, so there you go. So I guess it's not Islamic teachers again. It's that whole $1 million question of like, is it Islam or is it culture? And then does it keep like interfering with so many different things and ways of trying to have the conversation move forward in a healthy and respectable way. So maybe that it's not. It's just an overall. And I really like the story, Masha, that you shared. I mean, of Ta'if. Like, that's a household story. I think every Muslim is, and when you put it in that, and then you connect. It's amazing to hear. So now let me move on to Brother Muhammad. I'll ask you the same question about like the whole issue of Islam. I don't want to say verses, but like whole concept of Islam, like as Muslims, and you introducing and using psychology tools. I'm also curious because I'm looking at time. If you can bundle in, let's say, a success story, and you too, Sister Saba, afterwards, like a success story, a breakthrough moment that you've had in your with a client or someone that you feel like really encapsulates this whole idea of a Muslim, and let's say who was in the dark time, but yet they really saw the light at the end of the tunnel. And for you, there may be hundreds of examples, but if you could pinpoint one that really encapsulates this whole thing, that really illustrates what you're trying to say, I think that'd be worthwhile for a lot of viewers. And so Brother Muhammad, I guess starting with the whole
yeah. I mean, I think each one of these questions, Muhammad, can actually be, we can go into depth and take up like the whole length of the program. But, let me say this thing. I think the first thing we really have to understand is that why do we keep taking mental health and making this sort of like this separate thing, unless really it's a good business model, right? So there's a good business model to be had. The reality is, I mean, right now I'm being mentored by a retired clinical psychiatrist. And, he's of the opinion that we are all have the capability of being a therapist. And I was kind of saying to you, is like, really, I think if we just had more empathy, more patience, and more just actual genuine care, there wouldn't be a need for people like, for me to have this job, or for Sabra to have her job, or for psychologists or this sort of stuff, because, we as a human species would just be taking care of ourselves. That old adage, the village raised the kids. But to be more specific now, I don't think there's any contradiction between, psychology and applying all of these sort of models, because when we take a look at it, when we actually study the seerah of the Prophet ﷺ, he was a great therapist. Like, he truly was. I mean, if you look at the sort of questions, the sort of challenges, the sort of stuff people came to him with, right? It was all to do with fear, depression, anxiety, trauma, this happened, that happened, right? And, when we look at the seerah, the Prophet ﷺ's reply wasn't, you need to pray more, right? One of the things we know from his seerah is that when someone spoke to him, he would turn his body and be completely squared off and gaze at them and hold their eye. And when you would shake his hand, right, he would hold your hand and he would wait for you to be the one that pulled away. I mean, this is therapy, right? Because you would feel like you're the most important person that mattered. And his advice was very practical, right? And it was suited for whatever the person was going through and, whatever the context might be. And we have so many stories from like the Sunnah. Saba mentioned an amazing story. Another one that comes to mind that's very similar to that is, you talk about the guy, we all know the story about the man who, killed 99 people, and he goes to like the worshiper and says, hey, do you think God will forgive me? Right. And the worshiper says no. And we know this. And but the thing is, like, normally when we hear the story, really what they want to highlight is the difference between, a worshiper and a scholar who knows that Allah's mercy is infinite, right? But when we take a look at everything, I mean, that is psychology, that is actual care. The advice that the scholar gave about going to a different environment to take care of what's in your environment. You don't want to have cues from the environment that remind you of all the things that you used to do for you to have hope. I mean, this is the underpinnings of therapy. Right. So there's absolutely zero contradiction. The Prophet ﷺ himself was a great therapist. So I'll leave it at that.
Okay, fair enough.
Now you want a success story. I'll give you a really, really quick success story, which takes everything that what I focus on and about creating quick, rapid transformation that actually lasts. I follow up with my clients every year on the year just to make sure how they're doing. Right. So this was an individual who came to me, and I'm speaking fast just because, I'm conscious of time, is an individual who came to me with a lot of depression, right? She was diagnosed with chronic depression. She was diagnosed with an anxiety disorder, right? So I'm like, what does this mean for you, right? And she says, well, it helps me understand that, the reason I would just randomly start crying. And I say to her, and I'm giving you the short version, really, I'm leaving a lot of details out. But I say to her, listen, we talked a little bit about what's going on. And, during your high school years, your mother landed in the hospital in a coma, and then she accidentally died, right? That was totally unexpected. That happened while you were in high school. And then, right, your father thought that the best thing that would be he could do for his daughters was to get you guys married off. And you were like, no way, I'm too young. I'm only 16. And your father sort of kicked you out of the house. So I don't know about you. I don't think it's your depression or the fact that you have an anxiety disorder that creates you to randomly start crying, right? I think it's because these things happen. If these things happen to me, right, I would be crying too. I would randomly start crying too. This is something that shouldn't happen to anyone, and it did. Now, the real breakthrough for her, the same woman, about an hour later, I had her standing up in front of me, like actually physically standing up. I had her standing up tall. I had her do the Wonder Woman pose. Can't really see in the camera, but the Wonder Woman pose, the Superman pose, her kind of like this. There we go. Thanks. Right. So I got her to do this pose. And then I got her to tell me about a memory that she absolutely loved. She can freeze in time. So she went to her 7th birthday. And I'm like, what's going on? I use a little bit of hypnosis, whatever that means. And so she's in her 7th birthday as if she's there right now, reliving the entire moment. And she's describing to me how all her friends are there and they're all running around and they're playing and they're doing makeup with each other. And there's a chocolate cake. I'm like, how do you feel? And she's like, I feel so happy. And I'm like, where's your depression now? And she's like, well, it's not here. I'm like, I want you to try. I want you to genuinely try. Go find that depression, go find that anxiety and bring it into this moment. And she's like, I can't. Because why can she? I mean, she's living her birthday. And that was a huge breakthrough moment because for the first time in her life, she got to re-experience in her body, physically, the feeling of happiness, right? And that was everything because now she learned this is not a lifelong sentence. And she has the ability to take control of her thoughts and emotions and change the way she shows up. Now, of course, there's more work to be done in terms of addressing what's going on in life. But up to this point, she believed, because the doctor told her that I have depression, that I have an anxiety disorder, and the best case scenario for me is I need to learn how to cope with it. I mean, if you think about it, that is taking away hope, which, by the way, if you go by the DSM-5, which is like the checklist of how, diagnosticians diagnose if you have depression or not, absence of hope is actually one of the check boxes if someone is going to have chronic depression, right? I mean, there's more to it than that, but that's one of the check boxes. And you're giving someone that by saying that you have to learn how to cope with it, right? So that's my story.
SubhanAllah, man. I gotta tell you, I guess there's so many things to say from that. Like, I guess the one thing I can say is that we've detached our head from our body, right? In a sense, we're always thinking up here, but we forget how to use our body in so many different ways, and that we forgot sometimes to go back to a time when we were happy. For those who are stuck in that rut, SubhanAllah, man. Well, mashallah, I'm glad to hear that happy ending. And no,
I can just give you 15 more seconds on top of what you said because it's so valuable. If we think we can talk ourselves into feeling better, not going to happen, right? If we're emotionally compromised, if I'm having a bad day, if I'm sad, if I'm upset, if I'm angry, if I'm moody and all this, logic is not going to help me. And this is just studying basic neuroscience, right? The fastest way to change our emotion, which is, by the way, what colors and changes our thoughts. I like to teach people that our emotions are like Instagram filters for our thoughts, right? So depending on the filter, we're going to have very different thoughts. But the fastest way to change our emotions is through the body. We get into the body. We get into the sensations of the body, go for a walk. That's why they say stuff like go for a walk, work out, because we're physically changing our body. That is much faster than in changing our emotions. It's instant. And now that we have that emotional composure, that sends a very different neurological signal to our brain through the heart-brain connection, which now gives us 100% capacity for us to actually make good decisions, meaning we now are at a place where we can actually do something about what is, causing us to feel whatever we're feeling. So body first.
MashaAllah, that if you caught that, like that Instagram filter metaphor.
Everyone's on Instagram. I'm thinking of starting up an Instagram account for my iPhone photography. So
there you are, and MashaAllah, just dropping gems left and right. And so, Sister Saba, I guess to conclude, take us home. If you have a breakthrough story, with one of your clients, someone that you saw them in a rut. You saw them, in the darkest of times, but yet all from the permission of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and through your guidance and through whatever means you had, you saw them, come to light. And I hope it encapsulates a lot of, kind of what you stand for, how you approach it, but what's that shining story that you have in mind?
Well, Bismillah. Well, that little disclaimer that you see on TV that says, do not try this at home. So this is the opposite. I want you guys, whoever is watching, try this at home. Take a piece of paper, write down 5 negative things that you repeatedly heard about yourself. So you're too sensitive, or you're too angry, you're too much, you're too little, you're too whatever, right? Write down 5 things you've heard from others or you tell yourself. Now, to replace each of those, write down 3 positive things for each negative thing. I know it's a lot of work because it's easier to criticize ourselves than it is to compliment ourselves. That's the biggest thing I found, no matter what I work with, if it's addictions, mental health, depression, eating disorders, really anything. It could be something what we consider as simple, like educational achievement or lack of. There's nothing medical or mental health related there, even if in any situation this seems to work, is if we just learn to compliment ourselves a little bit more than criticize ourselves, and not think so much of everything people have said to us that it's negative or we've said to ourselves. I think that is what's worked for every single person I've ever worked with. It's a self-change, self-care, I guess. Self-care is a big thing. So that really works. So try it at home. Write down 5 things. You can make it 3. If it's really that hard, make it 3. Negative things that you've heard or said to yourself, others have heard about you or said to you, and come up with 3 things for every single negative thing, and see how that feels. That change inside you, in your mind, see how that feels. And
MashaAllah.
then you let me know.
MashaAllah. Jazakallah khairan. Look at that. You got a at-home exercise right there. And I guess the whole, if I understand it correctly, you know, it's summarizing this phrase, like what you're trying to accomplish with this activity or just writing things down is that rejection is just redirection. You take something that someone said about you, let's say in a negative light, but then you redirect that into something that's more positive and powerful. So, mashallah, that's a great, great exercise for all of us to have. So, Jazakallah khairan, both of you, Brother Muhammad Sheikh and Sister Saba, both of you have been tremendous. I mean, we can go for hours talking about this. This is just a stepping stone in the conversation, but both of you are doing amazing, amazing work. Thank you so much for taking the time out to share your thoughts. And we hope and pray to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to accept all your efforts. You know, there's a lot of things you don't see. You know, you go on Instagram, you go on Facebook, you go on Twitter, you go on all these, on TV, social media. It only tells you one side of the story, but behind closed doors, you really don't know what goes on in the mind. And so thank you both so much for doing what you're doing. You know, the world needs more of this. And so thank you both. And for all your viewers as well, just want to make sure you tune in every Wednesday, Muslim Network TV, 7 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. And this is your host, Brother Muhammad Maxwell Hassan. Until next time, stay safe, stay strong, and stay proud as being Muslims. Barakallahu feekum, jazakumullahu khair. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi.